Hello again. So last time I talked about a little bit about the shell structure of electrons in atoms, and today you'll see what that shell structure has to do with the way atoms bond together into molecules. This lecture is about atomic bonding. There's several different kinds of atomic bonding: covalent bonding, ionic bonds, metallic bonds, and polar bonds. Covalent bonds primarily occur between two atoms of nonmetals, those elements that are on the upper right portion of the periodic table, like oxygen and nitrogen, and of course hydrogen is a nonmetal. Covalent bonds are usually between two atoms of a nonmetal. An ionic bond is usually between atoms, atom of nonmetal and an atom of a metal. And the metals are, most of the elements, the ones on the left side of the periodic table. And metallic bonds are bonds between metal atoms. And there are different kinds of bonds. The electrons arrange themselves differently in these different kinds of bonds. A polar bond, I'll explain toward the end. On a molecule, especially a covalently bonded molecule, you can have places where the electron charge is greater and other places where there's less electron charge. So one part becomes relatively negatively charged and another part becomes relatively positively charged, and different molecules can stick together because of that negative and positive charging. So let me just talk about all this individually. So here's a depiction of an oxygen atom and a hydrogen atom. So remember, oxygen has electrons in two shells because it has 8 electrons, and in the inner shell, shell number 1, there's 2 electrons, full shell. In the second shell, there's 6 electrons, not a full shell. 2 more electrons can fit into the orbitals of that shell, and that would be a more energetically stable configuration for an oxygen atom. Here's a hydrogen atom. It's got 1 electron in its valence shell. It would need another electron for that shell to be complete, and it is energetically favorable for that to occur. So when a hydrogen atom, a lone hydrogen atom meets a lone oxygen atom, what happens is they begin to share 2 of the electrons. The hydrogen atom, its single electron becomes part of the valence shell of the oxygen atom, but it remains part of the valence shell of the hydrogen atom. So that's why they call this a covalent bond, because the electrons that are in the bonding capacity are members of 2 valence shells at the same time. So that's the 2 over on the hydrogen part, those electrons are members of the valence shell of the oxygen atom and the hydrogen atom at the same time. Now notice instead of having a 5 in the valence shell of the oxygen atom, I've separated them into pairs of electrons. That's because electrons, I told you that 2 electrons can fit into a orbital, right? So I'm showing those separately. Each orbital I'm showing separately. I'm not showing the 3-dimensional configuration of the orbitals or anything, but I just want to show those electrons separately for a bit. Now, you can see that 1 electron is still unpaired, so there's an orbital in that oxygen valence shell that doesn't have an electron in it. Another hydrogen atom can come along and share its electron. So look at the number of electrons now. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 electrons. That's the electrons from the original oxygen atom and the 2 original hydrogen atoms, but now 4 of those are being shared by the different atoms of this molecule. So this is a covalently bonded material. Water molecules are covalently bonded, and most bonds between nonmetal atoms and other nonmetal atoms are covalent bonds. And one of the important examples of covalently bonded materials is the molecules that make up your body. This is a protein molecule. You can see that it's made of thousands of atoms, and it has a very intricate structure. Most of these atoms are bonded together by covalent bonds, and you and I are made of proteins. That's one of the major constituents of our physiology. And so we are basically covalently bonded together. There's proteins in our neurons that make up our brains, there's proteins in our skin, proteins in our bones that make up all those different structures. So we are primarily covalently bonded together. There's also polar bonds in here, which I'll talk about in a bit. Now what about ionic bonds? So Covalent bonds are ones in which atoms come together and share valence electrons, and that is what bonds them together because it's energetically favorable for an atom to have a more complete valence shell. What about ionic bonds? So here you see a sodium atom and a chlorine atom, and sodium is element number 11, so it has 11 electrons in a normal neutral atom, 2 in the inner shell, 8 in the second shell, those are both full shells, and then only 1 in the valence shell. So because the atomic number is just 11, it only has 11 protons, those protons are relatively weakly attracting that outer valence electron. So the sodium atom is holding on to its outer electron relatively weakly. Chlorine, on the other hand, is element number 17, atomic number 17, so it has 17 electrons, 2 in the shell number 1, 8 in the shell number 2, those are full shells, and 7 in the valence shell. So it only needs 1 more electron to be a full shell, and it strongly attracts another electron to fill that valence shell because it has 17 protons in its nucleus, so there's a stronger attraction to complete that valence shell. And what happens when a sodium atom encounters a chlorine atom is the chlorine steals away the valence electron of the sodium. Now the sodium doesn't even have a valence shell because the shells are not empty shells where the electrons fit. The shells are the orbitals, they are the electrons themselves. And so the sodium atom is now missing its valence electron and its valence shell. The chlorine now has a full valence shell. All 8 electrons are in the shell number 3 orbitals. Now this makes these atoms ions. An ion is an atom that has a different number of protons than electrons. Okay, it becomes electrically charged. The sodium has 11 protons and only 10 electrons, so it is positively charged, right? More positively charged protons than negatively charged electrons. So it's positively charged. And the chlorine ion has 17 protons and 18 electrons, so it's negatively charged. That means they attract each other, right? Because they're both charged particles now. They're just not individual charged particles, they are collections of particles that have a net charge, and they bond together. So an ionic bond usually occurs between nonmetal atoms and metal atoms because these nonmetal atoms can strongly attract one of the weakly held electrons in the valence shell of a metal atom. This is the way sodium and chlorine ions arrange themselves in a salt crystal. Sodium chloride is salt, right? And if you ever notice when you look at a grain of salt from your salt shaker, if you look at it carefully, they look like tiny little cubes, right? And that's because of the way these positively charged sodium ions and negatively charged chlorine ions attract each other. They alternate because they're attracting the opposite one, right? So they form this sort of a crystal structure. So this is what's called an ionic crystal. What about metal atoms? So here's a bunch of nickel atoms. This is one of the ones that you drew the numbers in the various shells in the last exercise. Nickel is element number, 28. So it has 28 electrons, 2 in the inner shell, 8 in the number 2 shell, 8 in the number 3 shell, those are full, and then 10 in the number 4 shell. That's the shell that requires 18 to fill it, but it's not a full shell. Now when nickel atoms bond together to make metallic nickel, what happens is it's not covalently bonded or ionically bonded. What happens is the valence electrons all sort of form one vast valence shell. So notice that these nickel atoms no longer have valence shells. There's one fewer shells on every one of them. So they're ions now. And the other electrons from the valence shells have merged into sort of a vast valence shell. So there's 60 electrons, 10 from each valence shell, around all of these ions. And of course the electrons attract the positively charged ions, and so that's what the electrons sort of hold them all together. So you can understand a few of the properties of metal from the fact that they bond this way. Some of the electrons are mobile amongst these ions. That makes the material electrically conducting. What is electricity? It's electrons moving through a material. The electricity that comes into your house through those wires, they're moving electrons going through the wires, carrying the energy they've received from the power plant. And that's how electricity works. And that's because the electrons have this sort of vast valence shell. They're actually mobile. Some of them are mobile amongst the ions. And the way atoms in a metal arrange themselves is similar to the way you can stack balls. They call it the closest packing arrangement. The closest way you can stack balls together is like this. And that's because all the ions are attracting the electrons, and it's not a rigid structure of electrons, so they just pack as closely as they can together. And in this stack of ping pong balls, one that's in the center is touching 12 neighboring ping pong balls. So essentially, in a metal, every atom is bonded to 12 neighboring atoms, and you can depict it this way. So every one of these little balls on here has 12 attachments to other balls. That's one of the things that makes metal pretty strong. But it also can be flexible because, again, the ions can move amongst these electrons. Some metals are not as flexible as others, but, like aluminum, for example, you can bend it, and that's because of metallic bonding. The last type of bond is the polar bond. Here's a water molecule, and the fuzzy part around it is supposed to be the electron density. Because the oxygen atom has more protons than the hydrogen atoms, it draws the electrons toward itself, and that makes the oxygen side of the molecule more negatively charged, and the hydrogen side of the molecule is positively charged. That makes it a polarized molecule. The electric charge distribution is not even everywhere. That means that the negatively charged parts of a water molecule can actually attract the positively charged parts of a water molecule. And this is the way water molecules bond together, both in liquids and in solids. When you freeze water into ice, this is the way the atoms are bonded together, through these polar bonds. And it's actually what holds water molecules together in liquid water. Polar bonds are actually very important in proteins as well. That vast protein molecule structure that I showed you before. Those are actually long chains of molecules held together by covalent bonds, but then they wrap themselves up, and the positively charged, mostly hydrogens, can attract negatively charged, mostly oxygens, on different parts of the molecule, and it holds it together in what's called a secondary and tertiary structure, and that's what gives most proteins its final structure, and that's what determines how it works in your body. Polar bonds are also important in making water a solvent, right? You can dissolve things in water, like salt. Why does salt dissolve in water? Well, because the negatively charged parts of the water molecules can attract the positively charged sodium ions and remove it from a salt crystal. And the positively charged hydrogen ends of the water molecules can attract the negatively charged chlorine ions and remove them from a salt crystal. So this is why salt dissolves in water. There's other ways that things dissolve, but this is the way ionic compounds dissolve. So there's a few things about atomic bonds.